All right, hello. Um, it's time to do science. Science is very much like the reading test. The entire ACT is a reading comprehension test. If you've watched all these videos, you've heard me say that. So the science test is just very much technical, dry, non-fiction. There's very little science you actually have to know in terms of memorized facts or whatever from your science classes. It's primarily just reading and thinking like a scientist. So with that being said, I'm going to put on the little magic hat and flip the screen, and we'll work, give an overview of the science test and work one of the passages together. The science test has 6 or 7 passages, so more passages than the reading test, but there's a little less reading and a little less questions over each passage, generally speaking. So it's not like going to be a long passage and 10 questions. It's going to be a slightly shorter passage and 5, 6, 7 questions. So again, this is the 2018-2019 preparing for the ACT test. Was free. This edition is a year or two old in terms of school years. So there is a newer test available, but this is what I had available at my house. You should still be able to find PDFs of this online if you're interested in playing along. So the science test is going to be similar advice to the reading test. On the reading test, there are 4 passages, and you want to do 2 really well, and then work your way towards, if you're trying to get an even better score, maybe even being able to do 3 really well, or even try all 4. But you want to do 2 really well, and then if you have to guess on the rest, you'll still do all right. So it's similar here. There are 6 to 7 passages, and you want to do 3, maybe 4 really well. And then if you have to guess on the rest, that's okay. On the reading test, there's always a narrative, a story, and then it's a social science passage, and then it's a humanities passage, and then it's a natural science passage. And so it always goes in that order. And if you have strong preferences, you learn to pick, like, oh, I'm going to do the narrative and the humanities. And then if I have to guess on the social studies and the science passage, that's okay. Similar to that, but a little harder on the science test, is there are 3-ish different styles of passages. There's data representation, which are pretty easy to eyeball because they have lots of charts, tables, and graphs. The other one still will have some charts, tables, and graphs, but if you see more than 2, there's a decent chance that ACT is considering that as a data representation question. There are research summaries where you're comparing studies or comparing different experiment designs. If you get into comparing and contrasting what different students or different scientists are saying, that's more of a conflicting viewpoints passage where one of them's maybe a little more right than the other, or one of them's got some flaw. So first and foremost, what I want to do is flip through these and just at a glance tell you my guess for each of these. This is the passage we're going to end up doing. So I just chose to do the first one. And I see 2 different pieces of information, a table and a multi-bar graph. So that's probably a data representation passage. The second passage does have a table, but what catches my eye is in italics: student 1, student 2, student 3, student 4. So that's probably more of a viewpoints passage. If I had to guess, those students are going to be saying different things, and you've got to compare and contrast what they're saying. Passage 3 is what I would want to call like an experimental design type passage, because I see a diagram about an experiment. I also see a chemical reaction, and I see a couple different bar graphs. So this is probably a research summaries passage. 4, I see a diagram and 2 graphs, so that's probably some kind of data representation passage if I had to guess based on the glance. Passage 5, I see 2 very simple tables and then this word study. So I'm going to guess that this is a research summary. just based on the glance. Passage 5, I see this diagram. Study 1, a graph. Study 2, a graph. So this is probably a research summary. But again, I don't think these categories are pure. I mean, this has enough data representation in it, because there's also a question over here that's got a bar graph that you could say that maybe it's a data representation and research study, because or summary, sorry, because there's two different studies. Or if those studies are saying different things, it might even be a little bit of a conflicting viewpoints. Don't think of those categories as hard and fast. It's definitely going to be one or the other. But if you take enough of these practice tests that you get down, that you tend to do better on data representation passages, because you like do the scoring yourself and do the breakdown, then when you get to the actual test, if you glance through your science test and you say, well, there's 3 that look like they're data representation passages, I'm going to do those 3 first. That's a good strategy. It'll be 3 to 4. You get it done, and then if you have to guess on the rest, that's okay, because it was passages you didn't necessarily, without reading, feel as good about. You don't want to have to try to read all 6, 7 passages and figure out which ones you're going to answer questions about. And then that was it. So we're going to go back to this passage. I'll read it, and then we'll answer these questions, and that'll be this video. A study was conducted to examine whether female, and then if you see this in italics and they're talking about some organism, you can read that, but I wouldn't spend long on it. It's going to be Latin. It's their genus and species, because it's almost always going to say something like this after it: a species of cockroach. So female cockroaches prefer to eat cat food, cheese, ham, or peanuts. First, 200 milligrams of each of the 4 foods was separately placed into a single box. Now that I'm a sentence or 2 into this, this is starting to feel more like maybe a research summary. Then adult female cockroaches, notice I didn't, again, I'm just going to replace that mentally with cockroach every time I read it, were added to the box. Figure 1 shows how the mass in milligrams of each food in the box changed over time after the addition of the cockroaches. Table 1 shows the percent by mass of carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and water, respectively. I feel like it should be an R right here. R present in each of the 4 foods tested in the study. So I just read it, but I'm going to go double check that I understand it. This figure, the bar graph, shows the initial amount of each thing is the 200 milligrams. And what you can see is that they change by different amounts each time. And it looks like the one that's the stripes goes down the most, which is the peanuts. So as much as they might like cat food or cheese or ham, they might like peanuts the best. You can glance at where they stole this from, but I don't know that it's often going to matter to you. This table talks about the breakdown of each of these foods. So let's think about the peanuts, since that was the most common one. Peanuts, percent by mass, are almost half lipids, a little over a quarter proteins, and blow the other of these out of the water in terms of carbohydrates. I also notice that they have the least water. So again, without reading any of the questions, my immediate thing is that peanuts are showing a strong preference, and I find it interesting that they are high in lipids. Now I know from my science classes that fat is a lipid, so they're high in fat, high in carbs, comparable but still the highest on proteins, and they have the least water. So the cockroaches are maybe liking this because they're low in water, they're kind of dry and crumbly, and they are high across the board in all 3 of these nutrients. All right, so now that I've gotten a handle on what's going on, we're feeding female cockroaches these 4 different foods. We're looking at how the amounts left change over time, and the percent by mass composition of those foods. I'm ready to read some questions. According to figure 1, the mass of cheese remaining at 4 hours was closest to which of the following values? This seems like a very straightforward question. I go to figure 1. I check that cheese is the white bar. I go to the 4-hour clump. The white bar is above 180. That would be 190, 200. So it's between 180 and 190. And only choice C is in that range. So I'm going to go ahead and mark 1 as C and move on with my life. 2, suppose a company wants to use food as bait in a trap designed to capture female cockroaches. Based on figure 1, which of the 4 foods should the company place in the trap to maximize the chance of capturing female cockroaches? Well, we already said that when we looked at this the first time that one of my notices was that peanuts was probably going to come up. So peanuts, choice 2, or question 2 is choice J. They like the peanuts. Question 3. Consider the 4 foods in order of the percent by mass of proteins from lowest to highest. So we're going to go back to this one and look at proteins from lowest to highest. From food to food, as the percent by mass of proteins increased, the mass of food remaining at 28 hours. Okay, and then it's increased, decreased, increased or decreased in other orders. So if you look at the least to greatest, they're actually already in that order. Cat food, cheese, ham, peanuts. So proteins, we'd already said that peanuts continuously decreased by the most all along. And you'll see that that's true for all the other bars as well. They all start at the same, but the more to the right, because the bars are in this order, and that actually happens to conveniently. They're actually being nice here, and they didn't jumble the order on these over here so that you had to think a little more about it. It looks like it increased. So the amount eaten increased, I should say. So the mass of food remaining decreased only, choice B. 4, consider the statement. The cockroaches ate the food between 0 and 4 hours, between 4 and 16 hours, between 16 and 24 hours, and between 24 and 28 hours. This statement is consistent with the data in figure 1 for how many of the 4 foods. So how many of the 4 foods are only changing some of the time, not all the time? Is that basically what this question's getting at? So from 0 to 4, they all go down a little, so throw that out. From 4 to 16, they all go down. It looks like they all go down a little, like some of them go down less than others, but they all go down a little each time. So I would say that is consistent with all 4 of the foods. Choice J, going to move on with my life. Number 5, a student predicted that the cockroaches, notice how many times I've got to say cockroaches instead of that, would eat less cat food than ham by the end of the study. Do the data in figure 1 support this prediction? So a student predicted they would eat less cat food than ham. Cat food was black, ham was gray. After the experiment starts, gray is always lower than cat food. So yes, more ham was eaten. So we got to read them. Yes, at 28 hours, the mass of cat food remaining was about 55 milligrams greater. Well, if there was more cat food left, that would be consistent with them eating more of the ham. Let me read the start of the other one. Yes, at 28 hours, the mass of cat food remaining was about 95 greater than the mass of ham. So I do need to go look careful with the graph and be specific about how much more is left. So the cat food at 28 hours is almost 170. And the ham, which is the gray at 28 hours, is at 110. So 170 subtract 110 is about 60. So I want choice A because 60 and 55 are about the same. Number 6. Based on Table 1, when 200 milligrams of each of the 4 foods was placed in the box, water accounted for more than 100 milligrams of the mass of which foods. So water is half of which foods by mass. Oh, I did a little math there. It was originally 200 milligrams, and they wanted to know 100 milligrams. So they're wanting the percentage to be more than half. Water is more than half for cat food and ham. Almost the cheese, but not exactly. So water is half or more for cat food and ham only. Choice G. So there we go. There's several other passages, but again, I'm just trying to give you an idea of the sorts of strategies you might use on the test. Let me go ahead and flip the camera. Take the magic hat back off. And so that's all of the math test, because math is the one that a lot of students struggle with the most, and a passage from each of the other tests in addition to some general hints to just kind of help you out there. If you're one of my students and you're trying to get one of your scores other than math up as well, and the video helped you get started, but you would like more work, we can always do that. Just let me know. And then if you're just some random watching this 5 years from now, you can try to get more help as best you can. There's plenty of other things out there. Everyone take care. Thanks for watching.